Andrew is an international lawyer. He's worked on quite some high-profile cases, including a recent one, which I'm not sure if I can discuss. I'll leave that to his own discretion. And he's also a peace negotiator. So he works with NGOs and companies in a private to public capacity on reconciliation and peace. So Andrew, would you like to elaborate on any of what I've said?
I'm an international lawyer, an immigration lawyer, and I've been working on peace processes since the 1990s. I'm keen to get down to the Western Sahara and how to solve the dispute. But in case any of you are interested in UK immigration law, I should point out that I've just won the first ever judicial review case against the Home Office's algorithm, which it uses to decide 3.3 million visa applications a year. My clients were an elderly Syrian couple who wanted to visit their sons in the UK, and the Home Office wouldn't let them. I managed to force the Home Office to withdraw its refusal of their visas. And the issue has got lots of publicity around the algorithm. There have been articles in The Guardian and the Financial Times, and leaders of the opposition specializing in immigration have also pointed out the unfair discriminatory nature of the algorithm. If you read those articles in The Guardian and the Financial Times, you won't, unfortunately, see my name, because an organization sought to persuade those papers successfully that it would begin the first judicial review case, but we've actually beaten them to it, and it hasn't yet reached the press because I've been too busy with other things. So, if everything's okay with Osama, I'll get straight down to the subject we're here for.
Sure, absolutely. So, Andrew, would you like to present first on Western Sahara? Or would you like me to?
Happily. Can you all hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Ana Saeed باستضافتكم لي هنا. Thank you for hosting me, especially Osama and Shatta and Lawrence. This is my maiden speech here, but this maiden, unlike coronavirus, ain't made in China. My subject is the Western Sahara and Morocco's autonomy proposal, a proposal for peace. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, yeah.
King Hassan II of Morocco, 1975, 6th of November, led a march into the Spanish Sahara, a large desert to Morocco's south, controlled by Franco's Spain. Hassan led around 350,000 unarmed civilians, volunteers carrying Qurans and Moroccan flags, and supported by approximately 20,000 Moroccan soldiers. It was a peaceful march. He called it Al-Masira Al-Khadra, the Green March, and it's the most important event in Moroccan history since independence. King Hassan marched in his own words, to reunite it with the motherland, for he claimed historical ties with its inhabitants. 3 weeks previously, the International Court of Justice had published an opinion on the status of the territory at the request of King Hassan. And the court stated in its opinion, the materials and information presented to the court do not establish any tie of territorial sovereignty between the territory of Western Sahara and the Kingdom of Morocco. But the court did recognize historical ties between some Saharan tribes and Morocco. King Hassan used this recognition of historical ties as a basis for telling his people that he had won his case before the court. In fact, the court has emphasized self-determination. It wanted their own future, but King Hassan had other ideas, so he marched in, Qurans and flags to the fore. 45 years have passed since then. Morocco ever since. 50 years, a ceasefire in 1991, a communist group, Front, armed, diplomatic support Algeria, fought for the independence of the Western Sahara. The Polisario still claims the territory, and Algeria has spent more on arms than any African in recent years, Morocco being the only neighbor with which is in major dispute. Morocco allowed substantial resources into the Western Sahara, developed it enormously, calls it the Moroccan Sahara. And Morocco has boosted its own arms. The situation, sadly, could potentially lead to war. Algeria and Morocco fought Al-Harb al-Rimal, the War of Sand, in 1963 over resource-rich territory to their south around Tindouf. That was shortly after Morocco gained independence in 1956, and Algeria gained independence also from France in 1962. This earlier war, Al-Harb al-Rimal, caused intense hostility between the Moroccan monarchy and the Algerian revolutionary government. That hostility, sadly, still persists in certain circles almost 60 years later because of the Sahara dispute and beliefs on both sides of interference by each in domestic issues of the other. I, myself, love North Africans, Arabs and Berbers, Algerians, Egyptians, Libyans, Moroccans, Tunisians, and Sahrawis. I've visited them over 60 times because of this love. I've helped them professionally with their immigration law needs. They're warm, welcoming, charming people, all of them. So I'm doing all I can to help solve this dispute. I understand the wish of some Sahrawis for independence and of some Algerians for their Moroccan neighbors not to increase their resources and power. I come from Manchester, where both football teams, Red Devils and Blue Angels, call the other noisy neighbors. They don't like to be overshadowed. Personally, I wish them both well. Let both teams thrive. The main thing is that those really noisy neighbors down the road, Liverpool, don't win. Similarly, I want to see all the people of North Africa thrive, including Algerians, Moroccans, and Sahrawis. Eventually, one hopes in a successful union of Maghreb nations, like our European Union. It's their time for a place in the sun. So how to achieve a settlement over the Western Sahara? Sir Ian Brownlee, perhaps the greatest international lawyer of the last century, my professor at Oxford, taught me always to seek practical solutions to problems. So, what is the best practical solution for this dispute? After decades of reflection, my answer is Morocco's autonomy proposal, presented to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, in 2007. It's fair, flexible, and far-sighted. Fair and flexible because it combines a large degree of self-determination for the Sahrawis with an emphasis on negotiations. Interested parties can tailor their claims to their real needs. Far-sighted because it aims, and I'm quoting its section 3, to build a modern democratic society based on the rule of law, collective and individual freedoms, and economic and social development. As such, it brings hope for a better future for the region's populations, puts an end to separation and exile, and promotes reconciliation. Fair, flexible, and far-sighted also because Morocco guarantees, and I'm quoting its sections 4 and 5, Morocco guarantees to all Sahrawis, inside as well as outside the territory, that they will hold a privileged position and play a leading role in the institutions of the region. Thus, the Sahrawi populations will themselves run their own affairs democratically. They will have the financial resources needed for the region's development. End of quote. Can Morocco be trusted to deliver? Most definitely, yes. And these are some of the reasons. 1, Morocco is democratic. Morocco responded to the tests of the Arab Spring with lasting democratic reform and economic growth to the benefit of all, including Sahrawis. Morocco gave greater democratic freedoms to all the people. As a result, an opposition party was elected to power then and re-elected to power in 2016, though there was a high proportion of absenteeism. 2, this greater democracy in Morocco's national government was achieved without the great bloodshed which we saw, sadly, elsewhere in the region. 3, Morocco's constitution provides for enhanced local government throughout Morocco, and that applies to the Sahara also. 4, the OECD's 2015 report on open government in Morocco praises Morocco's moves towards transparency, integrity, and the participation of citizens in their government. 5, Morocco is also a world leader in producing green energy, including in the Sahara. That green energy protects the Sahrawis environmentally and helps combat global warming, the greatest danger to all of us. 6, Morocco has suffered very low coronavirus casualties because of effective, focused, and resolute governmental action. As of today, the 17th of July, 2020, according to worldometers.info, there has been 1 coronavirus fatality in the Sahara under Morocco's control. Wahid, one, that's all. By comparison, the UK, using the same worldometers, has 45,119. Algeria, 1,052, Mauritania, 150, and Morocco as a whole, 263. MINURSO, the United Nations force in the region, last month stated the Western Sahara coronavirus deaths to be 0. So one fatality for the Western Sahara seems to me to be correct, or roughly correct. Worldometers information estimates the Western Sahara's current population to be 596,911 as of the 24th of June 2020, based on UN figures. One death in 600,000 is not the worst of coronavirus outbreaks, and I see it as evidence of Morocco providing good medical facilities and good administration in protection of Sahrawi's health. 7, under Moroccan control, we see the Sahara Desert bloom. Its phosphates and fishing boom. Its literacy and standard of living are both higher than they've ever been. I've seen these with my own eyes in visits to El Ayoun, Dakhla, and the rest of Morocco. They all show that Morocco can be trusted to look after the Sahara and the Sahrawis responsibly and caringly through Morocco's autonomy proposal. I do not suggest that everything in Morocco is perfect, but I do sincerely believe that Morocco can be trusted to implement Morocco's autonomy proposal, and I call upon all sides to this dispute to embrace it as a basis for negotiations, as I have done in 8 speeches to the General Assembly of the United Nations and in 50 visits to the region. As a Briton who loves my fellow Britons and my fellow Europeans, I am sad that we Brits have left the European Union. Brexit teaches us the dangers of breaking away from a stable economic union. Britons are discovering that it's potentially perilous to leave our European Union and walk alone, even with all our 65 million inhabitants and with one of the world's strongest economies. For it is dangerous in the modern world to break away from a stable economic union for all the uncertainties of economic independence, even for an economic powerhouse like Britain. How then could the Sahara, with her tiny population of 600,000 and minute economy, cope alone without Morocco's protection? This is something the International Court of Justice failed to consider. Surely the Sahara would be at terrible risk of being totally destabilized or even destroyed, especially in North Africa, with its many fanatical militias and civil wars. Far better for the Sahrawis to benefit from fair, flexible, and far-sighted autonomy inside Morocco than to be nominally independent but swallowed up by fierce foreign wolves. For in Morocco's autonomy proposal, Morocco pledges to negotiate an autonomy agreement with the Sahrawis in good faith. And she pledges to work jointly with them to organize a referendum on that autonomy agreement, also in good faith and in accord with international law, with the UN Charter and with the resolutions of the General Assembly. That's in sections 27 to 28 of the proposal. Summing up, speaking as an international lawyer and a utilitarian, Morocco's autonomy proposal is the best practical way of ensuring the greatest happiness of the greatest number of Sahrawis. Please discuss.
Thank you, Andrew. So before I give my views and my talking points, I just wanted to ask a question of yourself, and hopefully of Rashida as well, about your respective interests in the conflict.
Thank you for inviting me. As I've mentioned last night when I got the kind invite, I'm here more to learn, observe, and watch, and pick up your points, and possibly have little to contribute when comparing to Andrew. Andrew and I have some similarities, if you like. I come from a legal background. I'm former police. I served in the Metropolitan Police Service and came out, unfortunately, from that job pretty sick a while back. I handled some pretty highly complex, sensitive national security cases in counter-terrorism, and if anybody knows anything about this particular field and the war on terror, you're not really going to survive as easily as one would hope. So I was also a number of years a consultant within the Ministry of Justice, and I'm also an internationally qualified restorative justice practitioner. In other words, my forte is crime reduction, and my forte is also community engagement, community sort of like, work, and so on and so forth, and human rights. I've worked with Amnesty International, which exposed me to a lot of knowledge, and I'm grateful for the background that I come from. Also, I'm probably a rare case. I have set legal precedents in the UK, as probably Andrew would understand. It is not easy to set a legal precedent, but I have, and I've changed the actual look on the Disability Discrimination Act in the UK. I will start really just by trying to frame something towards the subject title, and that is peace building in North Africa. My personal journey, including the spiritual journey, has led me to a complete shock, to be quite frank with you, and I'm still dealing with that shock. I accepted this invite because a friend of mine, whom I greatly admire and respect, Lawrence, opened the door for me to come on board. Otherwise, I'm not really necessarily sort of ready to engage, as I'm conducting personal research into a book that I am under pressure to write, and pretty much half of the book will cover my experience. Recently, I turned 50 years old, and for nearly half a century, I did not know who I was. And if anybody can help me shed some light, because I'm going to try to avoid going into the political setup or any religious setup that is concerning Morocco. I don't know if you guys know, Amazigh people, there is no kind of like, denying about this. My people are under oppression as we speak, and I did not know that I was not an Arab until my mid-40s, which is quite shameful. That will deliberately strip you of your identity, your history, your spiritual heritage, your land, and everything really that a human being requires as a recipe to survive and live to their full potential. My parents, I came to realize long after they passed away, I have lost five, I beg your pardon. I have lost my mother, I have lost my father, and I have lost 3 siblings to the oppression on my people. While I have a great amount of respect for what the Moroccan government, if you like, is trying to do here, I have been impressed by the way they've handled corona virus, because I've been here since the lockdown, starting from the 20th of March. to date. So I have been here since the 20th. I've been here, I've entered Morocco really on the 13th of March, and by the 20th, I'm super grateful. I've ended up in one of the most beautiful cities called Chefchaouen, and it had currently remains 0 corona. That's been, I believe, because it is a rather sacred and beautiful city, and I have very quickly made friends even within the actual police departments and their own bosses wishing to you know, meet up and have some meetings and conversations and dialogue with me. I quite appreciate that, and I have been very impressed with the way they've handled operationally the coronavirus and you know, managing the whole kind of, you know, setup. But going back to, as I've mentioned, the subject matter, which is peace building, my own contribution and viewpoint is that, you know, I doubt very much that any peace building could be possible unless the actual people of the land are given some form of a recognition. By that I mean, we are all hearing it time and time again. It would be very good if, you know, I am recognized, and you know, 60+%, I believe, of the country are Amazigh. I am sitting and having these conversations with the younger generation up to this afternoon and up to last night. They are pretty fed up with being labeled with an identity that does not belong to them. Although we have, you know, 0 issue, we are all Moroccans. I think this is a political kind of, like, you know, game that's been played. Again, we've seen it many a times. The colonialist kind of, like, you know, imperialistic mentality of divide and rule. We need to have that stopped. Moroccans are Moroccans. We come from, you know, different backgrounds and different sort of, like, you know, bloodlines and so on and so forth. But to label Morocco as an Arab and Muslim country is inaccurate. I think it should be, you know, the original people of the land, i.e. the First Nations, which are the Amazigh, should be given their due place in their own land.
Rashida?
Yep.
May I possibly answer that point?
Yes, please, go ahead. I was going to pose a question at you. Yeah.
Morocco has made enormous advances in recognizing the importance of the Amazigh over recent years. Enormous advances, so that the Constitution now specifically mentions the Amazigh origins of the Moroccan people, together with the Arab origins. That's the new constitution that King Mohammed introduced in 2011. The Amazigh language is now an official language of the country, and there are lessons in Amazigh in Moroccan schools. There's also a TV channel broadcasting in Amazigh, and if you go to the areas of Morocco where there is a large Amazigh representation, you'll see signposts and directions and names in the Amazigh alphabet. So yes, in the past, I understand what you're saying. Amazigh rights weren't respected or valued, but that's all changing now. The new king has been king for 20 years, but he's made massive advances into recognizing what is due to the Amazigh people. And as a fan of the Amazigh myself, as a fan of them throughout North Africa, and having helped them as an immigration law throughout North Africa, I'm very pleased to see the advances that are being made. Obviously, in 20 years, it's impossible to overcome unfairnesses that have happened for centuries. But the present king, I think, has done a marvelous job in improving the situation.
If I may sort of, like, you know, emphasize that I'm not denying the efforts by the King Mohammed VI. I believe that he's got an enormous enormous task ahead of him. If I could put him aside, I personally have zero issue with His Majesty, for sure. What you are saying, Andrew, I do believe you do not live in Morocco. I have been here for 4 months since the 80s. This is the longest time I've ever spent in Morocco, and conducting my own research and speaking from my own personal experience. The Amazigh language, that is the original language and one of the most ancient languages, Tivenach language, from which Phoenician derived, from which Hebrew derived, isn't just my responsibility or yours, it is the responsibility of the entire world, that it must be preserved alongside our cultures. And with all due respect, I am looking from my balcony at said one of those schools with the Tivenach, and that is all you're going to get in Morocco is lip service. It is not well practiced, and it should not. I mean, it's embarrassing that the actual language of the land, and one that is as ancient historically as Tifinagh language, is only recognized in 2011. And around about the same time, Amazigh people, a particular set of young family, had to take the Moroccan government up to the Supreme Court, so they may have the, God-given natural right to name their child an Amazigh name. So again, Andrew, with all due respect, I think my pain cannot be felt by you yourself. Although I appreciate the passion by which you describe my people's kind of pain, you have completely excluded Amazigh when you conducted your introduction to the topic. I did not hear anything about the Amazigh kind of life, as it were. We have untold amount of prisoners of conscience in prison. Why can't we talk about those topics? Because without addressing the ugly side of the conflict, I doubt very much that peace could be as easily brought in as possible. It's not impossible, but first we must address the challenges that are faced by North Africans in general. The array, the kind of like the entire history, our entire history has been erased, and I see it all the time. We do need a very strong leader, and I do believe that Mohammed VI himself is doing his level best, except he is wrongly misled and advised as to the the challenges, as I've mentioned, that the people of Morocco, for instance, and the Sahara are having to experience on a daily basis.
Rashida, I did actually mention the Amazigh in my address, but my subject is the Western Sahara and how to solve that dispute. I would happily meet you in Morocco and hear more of your views on the subject, but you're preaching to somebody who has a strong, and this is genuine, a strong love of the Amazigh. I'm trying to learn Amazigh myself. I spend a lot of time in Agadir with my Amazigh friends, with my Amazigh learning books in my hands, and I'm all with you in terms of promoting Amazigh culture, not just for the countries we've mentioned in North Africa, also in the Canary Islands, which were Amazigh territories conquered by the Spanish. I'm hoping one day they will be returned to the Amazigh people.
No, so with myself, obviously I'm Moroccan origin as well, Rashida, and I guess I sit somewhere between yourself and Andrew. I wouldn't say I'm as optimistic as Andrew, but I'm not as I don't think you're pessimistic at all. Actually, I think you're critical, and it's important to be critical. So for context, as some of you may know in the chat, I'll speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for Rashid. It is difficult to talk about some of these issues openly. I have commitments back in Morocco. My wife is there. So I need to maintain my safety when I travel from England to UK and back. So I'm going to be very selective about what I say and how I say it, okay? So I don't, whilst I acknowledge that Mohammed VI has made some steps, or more steps relative to his father in terms of including the Amazigh, I still don't think that enough is done in terms of their inclusion. I think that French is way more institutionalized into the legal language and the infrastructure of Morocco, despite it being a colonizer's language, and it's more institutionalized than Amazigh, which is the historical language of the region. The point of departure with myself, so I'll start with my points of disagreements with myself and Andrew, and then my points of disagreements with myself and Rashida. So where I disagree with Andrew is that I think Morocco is on the way to democracy, but it's not yet democratic. So there are a few examples of this. For example, the king can select the head of the parliament from the winning party. Under Hassan Thani, under Hassan II, the king could use the elections just as an information, but he would still select the head of parliament. Now, the king has made reforms to select the head of parliament, but they have to be from the winning party specifically. But I think that's an important step for us directly voting the head of parliament. I think that's what we need to get to. We need to get to that stage. Where I disagree with Rashida is that whilst I acknowledge that we've been Arabized and we've had the Arab culture kind of socialized and ingrained into us, and some may say imposed, I think to some extent the spread of Islam through North Africa and South Spain, it wasn't all peaceful. I agree with that. Some of it was violent, some of it was however, I think the distinction between Arabs and Amazigh is potentially in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia specifically, that I believe it's a false dichotomy, because all Moroccans, according to scientific research, have a similar gene pool. They are all a mix of Arab and Amazigh and Iberian and West African, including myself, who has been, like Rashida, I've been labeled Arab my whole life, and then discovered that I actually have part Amazigh blood, part Arab blood, part whatever. But I think those that identify as Amazigh and those that identify as Arab, essentially, I'm under the understanding that they have a similar ancestry. However, I acknowledge that our ancestry is not entirely Arab, even though we may be led at times to believe it is. I completely acknowledge that. How do you feel about my sentiments on the dichotomy between Arabs and Amazigh? Do you think that there is a distinction to be made?
The Rif region where I am at the moment, where my ancestry bloodline sits and lays, needs a lot of attention. This particular part of the world, the information that I am sharing with you is out there in the public domain. Most of it is not really my own words. It's out there in the public domain. All I am doing is just resharing it for the sake of this particular topic. The Rif used to be an independent Rif republic under the leadership of Abd Karim al-Khattabi from 1921, I believe, until 1926. What happened to that particular chapter of history, and why is there so much pressure placed upon the Ruefa people to be something they are not? I have the legal right and the natural born right to self-determination, and as I have mentioned, when you get to nearly half a century and you discover that you have been deceived, it doesn't really leave you with a very good taste in your mouth. I'm very, very fortunate, Osama, because I happen to attract really good kind of, like-minded people. Even here, I'm sitting with politicians and I'm sitting with the local authorities, and I feel safe, if you like, to have these discussions. And I am welcome to have these discussions, because I'm not out here to disrespect or offend anyone, but I have the total right to speak of any pain that I have experienced and my family has experienced. I've lost a brother because of this oppression as recently as last Christmas. And I have lost parents who should not have passed away due to the oppression and lack of medical facilities. You don't really want to know the full details. And I challenge anybody who will come to me and say, no, you need to be quiet unless you tell us that you are an Arab. I'm done with this kind of terminology of Berber. We're not Berbers, we're Amazigh. The Berber is translated to savage, and my people and I are not savages. We are Amazigh, Tamazgha, and I should be proud. I have a daughter whom I love dearly in London, and I would like to leave her with some sort of some sort of identity. I'll be totally frank with you. There's the history of Amazigh and the whole of North Africa. Obviously, as ancient Amazigh empires, we started from Morocco all the way to West Egypt and all the way down to Sudan and across to Canarias and all of that. I mean, anybody can look into the history and how many ancient, civilizations. My people used to be Gnostic Christians, animists, mythologists, and so on and so forth. They had the key, they had the answer to life. Obviously, invasions and oppressions came, and we must not shy, because like I said, if we are to secure any form of peace or build upon any ideals for peace in North Africa, you must come at it with some sort of with an honest and truthful approach. My blood type is EM81, as yours, Osama. If you have Amazigh blood, as I have, start from there, and you'll find zero Arab sort of blood in it. I don't even know how is it that the whole of North Africa has now become just the whole of North Africa has become Arab. Somebody please help me out with this, because I get confused and lost. The Libyans are Amazigh, the Tunisians are Amazigh, half of Egypt from the west is Amazigh, and it goes right down. The Sudanese, for instance, I've got a lot of Sudanese friends, and I've campaigned quite a bit for Sudanese. How is a Sudanese person with a Nubian background and history turned into an Arab nation? Really, we must call out these terms are just being used freely and willy-nilly. As I have mentioned, if we are going to look forward to building some peace, we must first acknowledge people of the land, and the history must return to books rather than be buried and erased forever. I can go on for hours on this.
So I just want to make a point. I agree with everything you're saying. Except the one point of disagreement I have is, and by the way, I'm very sorry to hear about your family. I'm really, my condolences for that. So I agree with you that this kind of homogenizing of North Africa into Arab culture is inaccurate. It's totally inaccurate. However, I do feel that there is a lot of fluidity between hereditary ancestry in terms of I believe that North Africans are a mix of, we're a mixed bag of different ancestries, such as Iberian, South European, Roman, West African, and Arab, and Amazigh. And Arabs themselves are also have mixed ancestry. The Arabs from Syria, Lebanon come from Turkey, they come from Iran, like their roots trace back some to Greece, some to Italy. So the reason why we're called Arab Research and Advocacy Bureau is because we recognize that Arabness is not just about ethnicity, but also about culture and language. And despite the origins of how Arab society spread and became, made its way into North Africa and to other parts of the Middle East is separate to North Africa, but more distant, for lack of a better expression, parts of the Middle East, we are still, we both agree that we are under this cultural influence. We both agree on that. And we both agree that the origins of that aren't pretty. But we just call ourselves Arab Research and Advocacy Bureau because we're simply acknowledging and recognizing the status quo. Like, we are part of that dynamic now. That's the label that's been slapped on us. And how do we deal with that kind of thing? So a lot of people have asked us why we don't put Amazigh in the title. Perhaps it's something we can consider. I guess, unfortunately, not many people are aware of the discussion about, about internal oppressions between Amazigh and Arabs and whatnot, which is, that's what's made this kind of difficult. But we're trying to be pragmatic, but we still have the discussion with the community, despite that. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, if this is your chance, perhaps I'm deeply spiritual. If you follow any of my work, my recent works for the last 2 years, I have now stopped giving any TV interviews with regards to policing or politics or anything like that. I'm really only interested in health and well-being and people's state of mind. And I'm also, like I said, still researching. And one thing, the reason I'm mentioning the kind of, the new chapter in my life is I'm a great believer in there is absolutely no coincidence in life. Perhaps this particular encounter between us all is, designed by the universe. for you to perhaps look into the title. I'm not saying remove the Arabs. Arabs are my family. They're my extended family. I love them dearly. I love the music. I love no other language. But for me personally, I would have rather not reach nearly half a century and then be slapped in the face, realizing that my entire life was built on fakeness. It's not a very nice feeling. It's like almost a shock of, you know, being in your mid-40s and suddenly being told that you actually were not, you know, were adopted. It's that sort of like, you know, anxiety, if you like. And it is no wonder we've got, when I look at the crime wave in London, particularly I was working in West London, which is predominantly Moroccan and Arab and so on and so forth. I've been responsible for creating many good things over there. And I'm still highly respected and regarded. But the problem that I found, and now makes a lot of sense to me, is our young people are getting involved in crime and drug addictions and so on and so forth. Why? Because they have this complex situation to do with their identity. On what, do you see what I mean? Identity crisis. We must not bring children up in an environment that that my family had no choice but to bring me up into. I grew up all of my life asking myself this one question: why is it that my mom and dad don't speak my language? By that meaning Arabic, because they couldn't speak Arabic. They're not Arabs. My mother had to learn as I grew up, word for word. Sometimes she couldn't even coordinate two words. I now realize and have come to discover, I mean, the question that I should have been asking, why is it that I don't speak their language? It has taken me, like I said, 45 years to uncover the harsh reality that my parents were driven out of their land in Nador, and that Hassan II had created a legislation to drive Amazigh, indigenous people, from the land. And Nador, if anybody knows, is from one end of the Mediterranean to the other end and go all the way to Lagash, which is the Atlantic Ocean. We must, you know, discuss these issues. We must, you know, speak up for self-determination. The Amazon region needs, all the indigenous people all around the world need to be heard. And this is your opportunity, of course, for anybody who's involved in these kind of discussions to not rule out or exclude the original indigenous people of North Africa. We are here and we are not going to go away. We've been here for thousands and thousands of years. I'll add one more thing. There's an ancient stone circle on the doorstep, literally, where I was born. And I had to go and visit an English friend of mine, who then brought up over a 5 o'clock tea. She brought up this ancient stone circle that could be the origin for Stonehenge. Yet it is not even registered or acknowledged by UNESCO. It just feels to me as if somebody is out to offend me and my ancestors, and it's got to stop. The discrimination also in North Africa is you know, is prevalent. There's way too much for us to sort of, you know, condense. But you know, as I've said, since the topic is about the kind of notion of building some peace, we must approach it with being honest and must use the opportunity while we have somebody in charge of a country who possibly is willing to actually take some of this on board. But the king himself is not going to learn anything because he's got the wrong advisors around him clearly all the time. I don't see this guy as some kind of bad guy. I'll be honest with you. I look at him in his face and I just feel like I want to give him a hug. You know, I can't even imagine the pressure that he's under. But clearly he is not in receipt of the full facts as to what is actually happening in this country. Whereas we have the chance and the opportunity to flesh it out and bring it to the fore.
Yeah, he is definitely, I agree, he's one of the best. He is, relative to his ancestry, he's one of the better kings we've had. I agree with that. At least there is some, that you can get to him in some way, you know? Like, yeah.
I would love to meet him. If he's listening or somebody who works with him is listening, I would love to meet the guy and sit down, you know, and share some thoughts. Why not? I've had the pleasure of meeting many people similar to him, if you like. I just believe that genuinely we've got some chance with Mohammed VI to get some stuff done in this generation rather than, you know, in the future.
Rashida, I don't know whether you've managed to spend a lot of time in the south, in the Souss Valley around Agadir, where the Amazigh are also in the overwhelming majority, and they exercise their cultural rights. There are Amazigh concerts and exhibitions and Amazigh museum, and there's perhaps a greater happiness of the Amazigh there, whereas of course recently in the Reef, and recently meaning for decades, the Amazigh people haven't been able to achieve their rights. But in the south, the position is a lot more positive. I'd just like to emphasize also what you've been saying about the importance of the Amazigh people, but from a historical point of view, one can't read Moroccan history without realizing the overwhelming importance of the Amazigh. Several entire dynasties, like the Al-Muwahhidun, Al-Murabitun, they're 100% Amazigh. That's for Morocco. You mentioned other countries of very strong Amazigh representation and history. Very few people are aware that even in Egypt, there have been Amazigh pharaohs, Sheshonq.
Yes, that's right.
Sheshonq, who captured Jerusalem, who's mentioned in the Bible. He was Amazigh, and the importance of Amazigh, the Amazigh contribution to the history and development of North Africa is invaluable and enormous. Fortunately, in Morocco, steps are being taken to recognize that all the more than has been done for many centuries. And that's a good thing. I'm sorry your family has suffered in the past. Hopefully, when there'll be peace over the Sahara, the country will be able to devote more resources also to improving the standard of living and facilities of all Moroccans throughout the country.
So Rashida, and perhaps Andrew, if you have any comments on this, I think Salma has a question about the Amazigh ties with Sudan, because she's Sudanese herself. So Salma, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Actually, I have a question, and also I have a comment on like a question in that Rashida was saying. So my question is, like, this is the first time I hear about any link between Amazigh and the Nubian. I'm from a Nubian background. So if there is any like place you can advise me to go and read to know more information about this, I'll be grateful. The second thing, when you were questioning like why all people in that region, they want to be called as Arab, in my thinking, I think this has link, like a special link to Islam, because in one time, like the Muslims, when they entered Africa, so they were like they settled in the region, and they were the power there. So everyone wanted to be included in that power and to be part from that power. So everyone wants to be Arab. And from my own country, from Sudan, we have a big problem on this. Like everywhere in Sudan, people, they want to be Arabs, and even after wanting to be called Arabs, you find lots of tribes, they say we have link to the ancestors of Prophet Muhammad in Al-Madinah, and we have ancestors, and they go and bring like family tree and write things and write names. So everyone is wanting to do that. Even people like in far South Sudan, and in West Sudan, who are clearly not, like, they have no any link. Also, they say, oh, we are Arab because we taught Quran in one time, and Arabs came here and we have links, and everyone wanted to do that. So I think it's like something maybe in the human nature. Everyone wants to be like the top or something. So I think now in Sudan, if the floor is changing to make the power in a hand of someone who is like from North Sudan or something, I will find many people, they say, oh, we are Nubians, we are we are this and we are that. So this is what I think. Thanks.
Yes, Samaha, I'm not quite sure where to point you to be quite frank with you, insofar as getting as much information as you can. Mine, I'm still scouring through. Our history has been erased, so it's very scarce to find information out there. I tend to do a little bit of research whenever I can for an anticipated book that I want to read. But much of my information about our brothers and sisters in Sudan, we are one. You and I are literally family, and we are tied by blood type more than anything. A lot of the information came when I was campaigning for a student who was going to be put to death, and lawfully. Luckily, we did relieve this student, and he was freed. But that exposed me to meeting a lot of activists from Sudan, as well a lot of diplomats. I have met many diplomats over the years, retired or active ambassadors within their rightful positions and so on. And it's when we're socializing that I really started to put pieces together about the Nubian, the rich Nubian history. The situation with religion is becoming like the evangelicals, if you like, the rotten element of Christianity. We have the extreme element. I am really not into any particular religion myself. As I've mentioned at the top of this conversation, I'm still trying to figure out who on earth I am first before I can adopt somebody else's identity. And you know, where poverty, where you have areas of economic deprivation and poverty as such, you do find people having to find comfort in religion. If that is all they have, then they will do anything for it. So if they have to create some sort of heritage that links them with the religion, then they will go there because they need to put bread on the table. We have seen this through history. It is really unfortunate. This is the reason why I call out for an honest debate once and for all, rather than just glossing over and playing lip service. We must tackle the root of these issues rather than just come on board and do one out, which I really don't do. I've spent many years as a public speaker as well, speaking on social justice issues, and I wish I'd actually known who I am, because I definitely would have tabled talks around the identity from a North African sort of perspective. So yeah, Samah, if I do come across any information, I have no doubt that Osama, myself, and everybody else, I will stay in touch with Arab as an organization, and we'll try and wire that over to you. But in the meantime, I would just encourage anybody to ask questions and stay as curious as possible. Curiosity can lead us to healthy knowledge, and obviously it makes us a lot better human beings. I will be much better as a human being to my neighbors and to my people here in Morocco. If I find out who I am and where I came from, I would become a better version of who I am today, and I'm constantly looking to improve on myself. I hope that kind of helps somewhat, Samah.
Thank you so much, Rashida. And I have a question, please. Definitely, I'm really grateful for all the interesting points that you have shared with us tonight. But if you can just elaborate briefly, if you like, on the nexus that you highlighted between what is not known about the Amazigh background and how that some young people are doing like not positive things. If you can tell us more about this, because I missed your point on this. You highlighted the nexus between young people's background as coming from Amazigh ancestry, and according to what I have understood, a tendency towards doing inappropriate things, or that can even be characterized as crimes. So if you can, because I don't see that the nexus between both of them. So if you can please elaborate more on this so that I can have a better understanding.
Oh, I see. So, I mean, I'm an international woman, so I have, you know, different sort of like, you know, viewpoints, if you will, but I am a Londoner, if you like. And so from my years of policing in London, particularly in W10, I'm very well known in Goulburn Road and that particular North Kensington. I'm still very well known. I'm the founder of many things, including a festival called the Goulburn Road Festival, which I worked so hard to put together as a community cohesive kind of initiative to bring Moroccans and their, you know, Portuguese, Spanish and English neighbors together, but also from that kind of strength that I have of crime reduction and the respect that I have from the hierarchy. I'm not saying my life in the police was easy, it's hence the book, but to reduce crime and to create that community cohesion, it exposed me to the inner workings of the Moroccan community. For young people there, to give you a brief sort of example, you have a young man, and I will focus on a young man, for instance, who is growing up inside a home. It's a home that is a replica of a Moroccan home here, as if nobody has actually moved anywhere in Europe. There's no effort to integrate or to you know, mix, you know, with the sort of like, you know, English kind of culture, if you like. So the young man is growing up being literally treated like the king in the house, where he doesn't really have any chores, any responsibilities, and so on and so forth, and he can do no wrong. And the next thing you have is he goes out to the streets of London and he's been treated like a street rat. Not my words, words of, you know, young people themselves. This causes a huge conflict, because outside of that home where he's been treated like a king, there's discrimination outside, there's hardship, there are certain challenges, and so on and so forth. If you bring the Amazigh element and you add to that, he is being told nothing about his Amazigh heritage. Now he's growing up as a teenager, he's already got enough issues to battle with, and now he's been filled almost with shame to even acknowledge his own identity. And nobody really should be feeling ashamed of their background. But they couldn't say Amazigh over here in Morocco. They certainly couldn't say it over there, because it makes absolutely zero sense. Nobody would even know that you exist. Identity crises are the root of many criminal issues that we have in the UK, and they do need to be addressed. And I have spoken quite a lot on this topic. If a young man or a young woman is growing up not knowing who they are, and also add to the mix feeling ashamed of their own identity, you are damaging them spiritually, physically, and emotionally.
Osama, you're muted. Are you trying to
sorry, yeah. Just before Lawrence asks his question, I just want to echo what Rashida said. I totally agree with you. I know some of the, obviously being British Moroccan as well, I've seen some of these challenges. I've worked in counter extremism as well, and I can definitely attest and agree with you that there is a strong link between identity crisis and extremism and crime. And I think Moroccans, Algerians, Tunisians, I'm not saying that we're particularly exposed to extremism. Different organizations, even white folk, can be exposed to their own forms of extremism. But I would say what differentiates our susceptibility to extremism is what me, you, Andrew, and everyone here has been talking about, which is the multifaceted nature of our identity. You know, being part Arab, being part African, you know, having the Arab and Islamic labels identified and attached to us. What does that mean? Our own internal racisms with other people in Middle East and North Africa, our own racisms towards people in our own country. All of these things, they add to this boiling pot of identity crisis. I completely agree with that, 100%.
Well, thank you very much. And yeah, I tried to really veer off, but I again, the topic of extremism is another topic, because I've got plenty to say on that. I was there at the dawn, reluctantly working on these cases, and I have fought hard against the prevent strategy way before it was even born. I had in fact compared it to the Stasi police way back in 2008, refused to work on it, and unfortunately everything that I was concerned about turned out to be true in less than 3 years later.
Yeah.
And with a budget that began with 0, and now we've got a counter-terrorism unit inside New Scotland Yard that I remember it having 0 penny in its purse, reaching nearly £1 billion in a matter of a decade. And as I've mentioned, Osama, I have never been a practitioner of any form of religion of faith. My religion is spirituality, and I go to Croydon to my spiritualist church, and always have been for more than 30 years now. But one thing that really breaks my heart and saddens me, and has actually made me sick to the stomach, because like I said, this is part of the reason why I came out suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder from the job, is seeing young men simply for being brown-skinned with the name of Muhammad, and they go to the mosque once or twice, minding their own business, being picked up for counter-terrorism, so threats and so on and so forth. The majority of them are innocent people. Who on earth am I to, I'd rather that young man is in the mosque praying than out on the street, drinking himself silly or taking up drugs and so on and so forth. If he's not harming anybody and if he's not spreading any, hatred, then why are we targeting the community? As I've mentioned, I've got plenty to say on the topic, and I'm not a huge fan of the prevent strategy. It has exposed us in Britain to more terror than actually has made us secure.
Lawrence, you wanted to ask a question?
Lovely to hear both of you, and fantastic presentations. Thanks so much for your passion as well. Actually, if I may, I'll have quick questions, one for Andrew and one for Rashida as well. Andrew, first of all, you mentioned the date you started your talk about Western Sahara in 1975, but of course until then, there was an insurrection, if you like, an uprising by the local people, the Sahrawi people, as you well know. And they were fighting to get rid of the Spanish, which they managed to do. But did they, in all honesty, want to get rid of the Spanish in order to be absorbed into Morocco? And which brings me to the question of those referendums that people spoke about. There's supposed to be a referendum. And I was just curious to know, because I know very little about that particular subject. But United Nations referendums were sort of mandated, and I wondered what came of them. To Rashida, thanks again for your equally passionate and moving and informative presentation, and also my sympathies to you for your loss, your family loss.
Thank you.
I hope the memories of your dear ones will be a blessing to you and your family. My question really, and I was fascinated to hear what you said about the ambit of Amazigh people throughout the whole of North Africa. But it seems to me, and maybe you can explain more, Amazigh seem more, how can I say, more self-defined, more open about identity in a place like Algeria, for instance, even though they suffer enormous oppression there as well, I know. But at least in Algeria, there is, I think, a political party which everyone knows, the PST, I think, represents particularly the people of Constantine, of Kabil, and so forth. Can you explain why in some places in the Maghreb, why Amazigh are more overtly self-identifying, and whereas in Morocco, in your own case, you say that it's been suppressed to a large extent? So,
Lawrence, I'll answer your question about referendum, and I shall keep it brief because I'm hoping to hear Laila and Osama also speak, and a lot of time has already gone. Referenda in relation to the Sahara is a very thorny issue because the different sides can't agree as to whom is going to have the right to vote in the referendum. Is it only going to be people who were included in a a list organized by the Spanish when they were in charge? Or is it also to include those Moroccans and their Saharan children who have been living in this Sahara for 45 years now? So there's a big dispute between the sides. Nonetheless, as I pointed out in my talk, the autonomy proposal does specifically call for a referendum once the sides have agreed on the exact details of autonomy, that it be put to Sahrawi voters, whatever that means, for them ultimately to decide if it's what they want.
Thank you.
And the question about Amazigh and why Algerians can express themselves in a way that Moroccans cannot, with regards to Amazigh specifically. Yes, Rashida, if you want to answer that, if you like, and I would like to attempt to answer this as well afterwards.
I have personally had friends with legendary Lunas Ma'toub, his cousin, who spent, who's unfortunately still in Britain, in hiding and in fear of his own life after the assassination of this legendary musician, who even has a name in Paris named after him. The Algerians are quite simply, as new media, they have, over the years, before I even kind of had my eyes opened as to you know, what's happened to me personally and my own family bloodline, I noticed that Algeria has had no choice but to be a little bit better, more coordinated and more active in the fight for the Amazigh. They are not a kingdom. They are, you know, they elect people. Although every government has let them down, they do still have that option of getting rid and then voting somebody else in. Whereas in Morocco, we don't. We are still governed by Arab elites, if you like, and have been for quite a long time. In fact, since the 1600s. You know, and I'm still kind of uncovering, but I think that's probably the answer, is the fact that they have a kind of like, you know, chance, if you like, to democratically elect. And if somebody lets them down, and they do let them down, as you can see, the protests that have been going on for months on end now, they still, the regime is still letting them down. They will get rid of them. You know, will do their best to get rid of them. We can't. We have one family ruling over entire country, and by God, they've got capabilities should the nation stand up and speak up and fight for its rights. And we've seen that in 2011. When the king quite rightly did the right things, like, hold on a minute, I think, yes, you're right, we need to look into this, you know, constitution and finally recognize. I think people wanted a little bit more than just lip service, and the Tifinagh language being plastered everywhere as if we are actually being used in it. I can assure you, I'm in Morocco. You can ask any Moroccan. We, you know, people are very, very petrified to speak up, especially seeing there's somebody who goes out to the street to literally demand a hospital, and a street gets locked up for 20 years.
So so yeah, my answer was it's quite similar to Rashida's actually. I think it's because of the link between the monarch in Morocco and the Islamic and Arab ties. A lot of Moroccan legitimacy rests on the fact that, on the idea that the king has hereditary links to the Prophet, and you know there is this kind of vision for a grander Islamic Maghreb. And linked to that, as Sama I believe alluded to earlier, is the idea of Arab identity and Islamic identity being connected in some way. So as soon as that becomes undermined, the whole system enters cognitive dissonance. It's kind of like the whole system needs to break down and be questioned. And I think perhaps some Moroccans, and understandably, are just thinking about their basic needs. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy, then you know they don't want to have this question. They don't want to enter cognitive dissonance and have a massive kind of rethink about the constitution, about their own identity. They just want to go to work, pay for their bills and sleep at night. Some people are in that situation where they're just thinking about their immediate needs, their immediate bills and their health and whatever. But I would say that's the difference. Yeah, I would say that's.
Osama, I haven't even had the chance to talk about another part which is really, really passionate to me, and that is the actual our own Jewish heritage in Morocco. That's another completely separate topic. Something that really upsets me is, for instance, you know, you look at the spiritual city, now they call it the spiritual city of Fez, which was founded by a Jewish woman 500 years ago, and now you know, it's littered. Sorry, we've got a little guest, if you don't mind, and I'll finish up. Can you say hello to Sparkle? Hello, baby. Say hello. Yeah. Anyway, so yes, Fez, as I said, founded by a Jewish woman, an incredibly well-known, loved, respected Jewish woman. History has erased her and placed a man, an Arab man, in her place. The beautiful city that I am at in Chefchaouen, founded by, you know, what's the name? Lella Yaduna. Lella Yaduna is a very well-respected Jewish lady. And again, there are still existing Jewish families here. In fact, I have Jewish, I've spoken personally since I've been here, Jewish Amazigh Ruefa from the Rif Mountains who were forced to change their surname from a Jewish surname to an Arab surname that has slave written on it without divulging too much. This is as recent as this generation. We must speak up. You know, my ancestors were, I said, that we're ancient Jews, we're not Christians, we're animists, we're mythologists, and by God, nobody's going to be, you know, shutting this one out for speaking up. You know, I must confess, even Israelis and our brothers in that sort of like, you know, and need to come back home and revive some of this history, because it belongs to my grandchildren.
I agree with that, definitely.
And theirs.
By the way, I'm from Fez.
Are you? It's a beautiful city.
Thank
wow.
You. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a few conferences happening from Fez, but I'm definitely going to Fez. It's a beautiful.
Yeah, next time I'm down there, we'll meet inshallah.
You're lucky, man. It's a beautiful city.
Yeah, so I just, before I want to bring Mark in before we wrap up, and just beforehand, I want to make a point, which is, obviously this is being recorded, and I want to make my point so that my views aren't misinterpreted on YouTube like they sometimes are. I don't view Algeria romantically. I think Algeria has its own problems. With regards to Western Sahara, just as Morocco has neo-realist ambitions for it, it wants to co-opt it into its own territory for whatever strategic geopolitical reasons. I believe that Algeria also has its own aspirations. And one thing that frustrates me is, whilst I understand that the Sahrawi are trying to, some of the Sahrawi, the ones that believe in their own autonomy, are, you know, they're fighting Moroccan jurisdiction, and they've rightly fighted against Spanish colonial jurisdiction. What I don't understand is some of their sympathy towards Algerian authorities. I still think that Algerian authorities also have ambitions of their own for that region, just like anyone in geopolitics does, just like any nation. If they're doing that as a strategic means to an end, then perhaps there's a justification there. But I think anyone that views Algeria's interest as a purely charitable one, I believe is, if I can humbly say so, I believe they're being naive, in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know, before I bring Mark in, I don't know if Andrew or Rashida, if you have anything to say about that point on Algeria.
Only a couple of points before I take over the whole conversation, but why do all wars start, Osama? It's one word, and it's a two-letter word, and America got it wrong when they accidentally released it before they attacked Iraq and Iraqi people. It's oil, and in fact they called it Operation Iraq Liberation, and they accidentally put it out there. Mm-hmm. You know, yes, it's oil. Oil is what they have in the region, and you know, both kind of like countries quite rarely are not going after the human rights, they're going after the wealth of the land. It's also got historical richness. Like I said, we can go on about the Amazigh identity for a long time, and you'd be absolutely shocked and humbled by how relevant and important the Amazigh people are not just to North Africa, but to the entire world. It is evidence that is emerging that the eye of the desert, which is just south there by Mauritania, could actually be the stamp that is remaining from the mysterious Atlantis itself. It fits perfectly Plato's description, and in which he even refers to those people in the north, as in the North Mountains, which is the Atlas. There are many, many reasons, but I would still take it back down to oil and money, the root of all wars and conflict.
And Andrew, do you have anything you'd like to say on Algeria's involvement in the war?
I'm looking forward to hearing Lila and your own contribution as build and Mark's contribution. We don't have much time left, so I don't want to take any time from the others as a true Democrat.
Sure. Mark, I just wanted to understand, to gauge your interest in, I know you're very active in politics, especially in the UK. Was this conflict of particular interest to you, or were you just trying to understand it and learn from it? Where do you sit on this?
I was taken by the idea of peace building in Africa and in North Africa, sorry, I meant North Africa, and the conflicts there. And wanted to learn more. And wow, you know, these are things I'm almost completely ignorant of, though once upon a time I did visit Fez, as I think I told you. So I have vague links, but no great insight or wisdom. And it's amazing to hear, so thank you very much. I'll mute now.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So I guess on the final note, because we do usually wrap up at 8:30, but perhaps we can go over by 5 minutes or so. I think we should just kind of gauge our opinions on, okay, we've spoken about the problems. There is a conflict of identity in North Africa specifically. Now, what's the solution? Now, instinctively, I do say education. I think education is very important, because when you become educated, you become aware of your own identity, and a lot of these instabilities naturally level out. I'm guessing Layla agrees. Now, I just want to see what Samah thinks from a Sudanese perspective. I know they have their own conflicts, internalized conflicts there as a North African country. If you could kind of summarize what you think needs to happen next in Sudan, Samah, what do you think it would be?
Actually, the situation in Sudan is very complicated. So now at the moment, the civil war, it should be stopped and everything, but it's not the case actually. And now people, they are in negotiation in Juba between the Sudanese government, the new Sudanese government, and the armed movements from Darfur, Blue Nile, and South Kordofan. But still, like lots of people getting killed, like last thing happened 2 days ago, is like a massacre. And I actually personally, I don't have any like I can't expect anything, because it's changing every day. But I think the main thing is that the government of Sudan is dominated by people from North Sudan, by elites. I'm from North Sudan, but I admit people from North Sudan, they've been part of the of the racism and genocide and lots of the conflict in many aspects and many ways. They are involved in that. So I think people from other parts of Sudan, they need to get to get places, main places in the government, not like secondary places and not that important places. And I think this is the issue now in Sudan. So unless people understand that, and stop being dominating over the wealth and the power, this will not end. Like if you do negotiation for thousands a year, and you are not willing to make real change and core change, nothing will improve.
Sure, and I think Layla, so you're saying representation is important. I think Layla wanted to come in on a point on this. Layla.
Well, like the chocolate advertisement said, the sweetest comes at last. So I'm going to take this opportunity to smooth talk myself. I'll just be brief. It's really brilliant when hearing and listening to all of you from all your perspectives. So I'm not from North Africa, but I share one similarity, which is being Arab. So I have a Palestinian Arab Christian, which has a share of conflict in the region. So my observations to many of the things that I've heard. So I think Algeria's intervention is just like Hezbollah saying they want to free Palestine. And we would love to see the Moroccans back in Morocco, or at least interact with them, especially the refugees who came to Israel, because I can tell you that they're not treated very well here, and they've been discriminated against so much. And for the whole thing, it's really difficult to see this proposition that Morocco is proposing without asking a question whether we want this conflict to end, as in Morocco is so keen on unifying Morocco regardless of ethnicities and people. Like Rashida was saying, Moroccans are Moroccans, or is it about also power? Because this is what I see. From what Andrew was saying, it seemed like a really nice proposition in how Morocco has advanced it. But at the same time, you can see, I observed that this is how Morocco wanted to engage people, but from a power perspective. It seems like, well, like this is evident. I'm sorry if I'm ignorant at this, but it seems like the upper hand is proposing things that should be peaceful and good for everyone, which in fact, when I hear Rashida, and from my own experience as a Palestinian, I know for sure that the rights of people have been oppressed for so many years, are not seen within these agreements and peaceful or autonomy proposition that is being put on the table. That being said, is the question that the Amazigh or the Moroccans who feel oppressed in this question to answer is, we want to see ourselves as Moroccans in one country and try to look at it from this way, or are we looking at autonomy in a place where we want to do nothing with Morocco, we are a separate entity than Morocco, and then that's a different way to look at it. But I can see from the proposition, I wish we had more time to discuss it with Andrew and Rashida, but the question to Andrew, when this plan is proposed, how is it looked at in terms of it overpasses the will of the people? Is it the will of the people, or is it the hand of power? Presenting, I don't want to do any kind of assimilations to the deal of the century we're receiving, but it seemed like a very far-fetched, some kind of copy of it, where the upper hand is saying, let's do this, we're getting better at this, we want to do this, but under our control. So where is that? How does that go into the long term? Does it guarantee that the rights of people and the people who have been oppressed will be given a space to try to heal, or to find their identity, or to find the actual piece of that proposition?
Lila, your question is a very good one. The Moroccan state could be seen by others as, in effect, taking over the territory and not as yet organizing a referendum for the autochthonous inhabitants of the Western Sahara to express their own view as to who they want to rule them. That is one side of the issue. But on the other side, Morocco has ploughed enormous resources into this region, so that the level of development and income is higher on average in the Western Sahara than in the rest of the country, because of the resources that Moroccan central government has put into it. Now, I'm a realist, and I know that if there's one thing that unites the rest of Morocco, it's not to give 1 inch of the Sahara to anybody else. They will not give over any of it without a referendum. And as a result, as a realist, I think the best deal for the citizens of that area is this particular autonomy proposal by the Moroccan government, because it gives them lots of what they want, not full independence. If the majority do want that, we don't know. It
But a
doesn't.
question.
It
I'm
doesn't
sorry,
give.
it's just
Yes.
now I have to compare. I'm sorry, because in the deal of the century, the Palestinians are given $50 billion to try to do things and industrial zones. But in fact, what we're giving is 1 per million% of what is in the first place is our right to thrive and to do that. So do you think that economic development promised to people would justify colonization or justifies, I mean, for me, this is how I look at it. I don't want to seem, like, because I know someone doesn't like me when I'm so strong in my opinions in that sense. But for me, I feel like it's also buying off what people don't want. How would you guarantee that this autonomy proposal is representing what people want if in the first place Moroccan's union is what is there? And I know I'm not against Morocco, actually. I love it as a country. I'd love to come visit, and I'm so, I have a lot to learn, but that's not my question. I'm not opposing Morocco as in sense.
I
speaking
understand
of the notion, do you think this would be fair enough? Because the first thing you described this proposal is I'm intrigued to hear the question. You said it's fair. It's a fair deal.
Laila, I understand your point of view, but it's not really right to make a comparison between Palestine and the Western Sahara.
Of course. That's not the point.
The main reason being that a large number of Sahrawis are very happy being under Moroccan control.
So why isn't there a referendum?
And they see themselves as full Moroccan citizens.
But the question is, I have a problem at two ends from this one. First of all, there isn't a referendum that would support this. And second of all, I think minorities are not given justice in that sense, because even if majority are with the Moroccan government and feel that they are 100% Moroccan, there are other people who are oppressed and they are a minority, but still they're at a place where they're not happy with what's going on, or it's a different perspective of things.
I understand what you say, but I personally, having been to the area and having discussed the issue with Sahrawis on the ground, I think talking about oppression of them is a bit of an exaggeration. I understand that there are many of them who want their own state, and I understand that when they've demonstrated in favor of independence, they feel they haven't always been respectfully treated by the Moroccan security services. I understand their position and I respect their position, but nonetheless, I repeat that the standard of living in the Western Sahara and the standard of development is higher than that of the rest of Morocco. The level of alphabetization, of literacy, is higher than in other areas of Morocco, and they have benefited enormously since the Green March. But they're not going to get full independence, and I think that their best future is going to be as part of the Moroccan kingdom.
Thank you. I'm not pro independence per se. I mean, I think union is, for me, I would love to see Morocco, because there's no comparisons in my case, but it's not about what's optional, what's the best option for them, but is this the best option for the people, or has this proposal not say that are people presented in this proposal? Does this proposal guarantee that there's justice, not only fairness? Because fairness in the end becomes a deal. It's about it's something that has to do with numbers and crunching them and development. Could be the Moroccan state as a state that holds all these ethnicities and all this diversity, because Moroccans are Moroccans regardless. But the question is, does it justify it? And is there enough leadership at the other end, not only from the Moroccan branch, from Morocco's end, but is that also covered at the other end? Is there somebody else?
And again, I think overall, they're doing very well. And I think it's the best future available for them.
Can I just want to make a point.
That's my position.
Oh. Sorry, apologies, you cut out.
Thank you. Yes, Osama. Thank
you.
Sorry,
my connection is very unstable. Leila, I respectfully disagree with Andrew. I think you cannot know exactly what people want, because the problem is those people are socialized now. In the same way that if you ask the Falkland Islands what their opinion is on British sovereignty, a lot of the people that now reside there have their opinions are influenced by the British education system. So they're now going to respond in a way that maintains the status quo. I suspect if any referendum was done at the inception, the answers would have been a lot different than what they are now. They may vote to stay in Morocco, but that could be a result of Moroccan institutionalization, which complicates the situation. But yeah, that's my opinion of it.